there was going to be a significant decrease in the ownership of cars, that people will be checking out cars like you do books at the library. He fully believes that. He's seen enough to see that coming. And a lot of that is very heavily dependent upon technology in transportation.
The knowledge of our people plus their understanding of the importance of service have really put us in a good position.
Welcome to SSR On Air. I'm Mike Rogers, your host for this monthly podcast brought to you by Smith Seckle & Reed. Tune in as I interview leaders, colleagues, and clients about what is going on internally at SSR and in the larger engineering community. So today we're sitting down with Beaus, who currently heads up our civil transportation or horizontal group. So let's start with just a little background on how you ended up at SSR, your path here.
It's long and windy, and really dependent upon relationships. And I graduated from Rhodes College in Memphis. It was Southwestern at the time, with a business degree. I went to work for my dad in the leather business. He was a wholesaler to boot manufacturers around the country, and so I worked for him for a year and a half, traveling the country, peddling leather and working in the factory and all that. And we had a good customer in Memphis, big wholesale house, and they wanted to get into the white weight shoe repair business. Back in the early 80s, that was a trend. A lot of European companies were coming over into malls and doing white weight shoe repair, which was pretty different for the U.S. Yeah. And so they had an interest in getting into that business, and so I quit my dad's business and went to work for a Belgian company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I learned how to repair shoes in one summer, white weight shoe repair. And worked for them for about 4 months, and then went back to Memphis, and we opened up our first white weight shoe repair shop in the Mall of Memphis, which is no longer there. And I did that for 10 years. I actually went out on my own. I had 4 shops at one time, 1 in Memphis and 3 here in Nashville. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was at about 7 months. And I came home one day and said, I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to sell these shops and go back to school. So while I was at MTSU, we had a friend who had been married to a high school friend of mine. And she was dating this guy, and we went out on a double date one night, and it happened to be Rob Barrett. And I remember we went over to her house one day, and I looked up on the roof, and there's Barrett cleaning out her gutters, and I thought, that poor guy, he didn't have a chance. He's deep into this. Uh-huh. And lo and behold, they got married. But anyway, he said, while we were out to dinner that night, he said, well, why don't you, I'm an engineer, why don't you come by and visit us and look around the firm? And I said, that'd be great. So I knew I wanted to be an engineer, but had not been to many firms. And so I did. I went over to the West End office and visited him one day, and I walked into his office, and I didn't know he was CEO. And I sat down in his office, and I went, damn, engineers have nice offices. I think I could do this. And
you didn't notice the rest of us sitting out there in the cubicles?
He didn't let me in back there.
Well, and hardwood doors for desk and all that stuff like that?
I think he did finally give me a tour. But
yeah.
He said, listen, if I had stopped working at the shoe shops at that point, and they were in the process of selling them, and he said, why don't you come to work here for part-time while you're in school? And I thought, well, that'd be great, have a little grocery money. So I did that, and I started working part-time, probably 10 hours a week, and going to school full-time. And then when I transferred over to Vanderbilt, it was sweet because school was a walking distance from the office. So I would come to work in the morning and work a little bit, then I'd go off to class and come back to work in the afternoon. And it was really cool to be taking engineering classes and working at a firm at the same time, which was all new to me. But I had all these periodicals. I could write papers like nobody's business. I could just pull out articles, and it was pretty easy. And I worked for John Ross. He had no idea who I was, and I was working for one of his designers, just sort of picking up a little work here and there where I could. Worked for Gene Spires, running loads on buildings, and whatever there was to do, I did. And when I had been at Vanderbilt for about a year, I was a civil engineering student, and so I had made friends with the civil engineers down on the 7th floor. And I'd go down there a lot to see what they were working on and if I could help them do anything. And finally, I walked into Steve Lane's office, who was leading the civil group at that time. And Steve at that time was a very intense person. He has softened a good bit in the years since.
He has?
Yeah. And no doubt. And I walked in and sort of half in his office, half outside the office. I had met him before. I said, Steve, Beau Butler, I'm a student working part-time. I said, you don't care if I come down here and work for you all part-time, do you? He looked up. I think he shook his head or said something that I took as a positive answer. And so I went up and got my pencil and moved down to the 7th floor and been working in the civil group ever since.
So when you first came in, then what did the structure or the breadth of the horizontal group look like at that point? It wasn't really the horizontal group at that time, but
no.
What
it was civil environmental, strictly water, wastewater.
Okay.
Didn't have structural engineering. We always hired that out to a sub consultant, usually Jack Hughes, who had a small shop himself. And
talk a little bit about the technology changes that are going on in the transportation world that we're seeing out there.
Technology in transportation takes many different faces, many different forms. One is in smart roads, which involves cameras, sensors in roadways that talk back to sensors in cars, all to try to improve traffic flow, safety, and I think it's the direction transportation's going, but it's really expensive. TDOT led a contract last year, 2 years ago, for a smart corridor between Nashville and Murfreesboro on I-24. It's being designed now. We have the contract for some of the CE&I inspection work for construction of this smart infrastructure. And there's so many people involved, from controls type people, integrating that type of data into a single system that can be used to, count traffic and predict peak flows of traffic and try to find ways to smooth it out and reroute. And there's just a lot of data that's being generated from this. So you can imagine a state like Florida. The state of Florida has a camera on every single mile of interstate highway, statewide. And that's the first step in smart transportation. They will follow that up, I'm sure, with smart roads, with sensors and that type of thing like I'm talking about. And we're trying to position ourselves from the inspection standpoint first to be a part of that, because there's going to be a lot of money spent there in the next 10 years. As transportation, I think, is going to change a lot. The previous commissioner of transportation at Tennessee felt like within 10 years there was going to be a significant decrease in the ownership of cars, that people will be checking out cars like you do books at the library. Yeah. He fully believes that. He's seen enough to see that coming. And a lot of that is very heavily dependent upon technology in transportation.
Fun things that group's doing, or interesting things?
Interesting things to me now as the leader of the infrastructure group is the younger people that we have brought in. We have brought in such great young people from EI level up into the engineering, first 5 years of engineering, but a lot of leadership opportunities there for these young folks. And I think what we talk about in our leadership meetings is creating opportunities for young people to have more responsibility and really begin to take a meaningful role in leading the business into the next few years.
Yeah.
And I think we have such a great group of people. I think they're ready to do that, and we just need to be able to supply them these opportunities. And so I'm excited about the future of SSR. I think we've done a great job building a base of colleagues that can run with the ball, and we just need to be able to hand it off.
Yeah, well said. I agree. And you look back at the things that we did when we were in our mid-20s. I mean, Clay was just in here talking about that as well. And 27 is when he went to Houston and helped open the office.
27 years old.
Yeah, quite the step. So I think John Ross was probably pretty close to the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got to take a chance, take some risk, and I really think there's very little risk in it, because I think we've done very well hiring and bringing on colleagues that are smart and responsible and enthusiastic about what they do.
Yeah, my experience is they exceed what you think.
Absolutely.
Every time. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in and
sure
talking and sharing with us
help.
a little bit. Appreciate the history and the look forward.
Absolutely. Thanks.
We're sitting here today with Jim Seckle, who's now the head of our operational side for our commissioning group. Is that fair?
That's a fair statement.
Okay, good. And so, Jim, it's not going to be tough. There might be some tough questions later, but not tough.
Hit it.
All right. So first thing I wanted to just kind of hit on is your background, where you came from, how you got here, what's your story.
Sure, Mike. I got hired by SSR in 2001, and my initial position was in our sports team at the time as a construction administrator. And I think a couple reasons I was hired for that position. Previous to that, I came from working for a general contractor, a small general contractor called King Construction from Louisville, Kentucky, and we were primarily focused on government construction, VA construction. And before that, I was an Army officer. So I served 5 years in the Army, got out as a captain. I was a Corps of Engineers officer and primarily involved in troop positions and stationed in some interesting places like Alaska and the Republic of the Marshall Islands and in Texas before I got out.
Nice. A little bit kind of like my background, some.
Yes,
I was Air
very
Force,
much.
But similar in a way, and I had 3 duty stations and about 7 years in. So.
Right.
Yeah, I ended up in Hawaii though, so pretty good. Kind of like your Marshall Islands, I guess. Yeah, it's not bad. So, so that was when you came, 2001.
Yes.
Right? Yep.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So that wasn't long after I got here, and at the time it was right about the time that I took over the sports team, I think.
That's right. You were my second boss
at
SSR.
Yeah. Very good. And you went on to such great things after that.
Well, and a lot of that was I think some of the advice you gave me was when commissioning came up and I had the opportunity to move over to that business when it was just starting up. I think you encouraged me to do that. You told me there would be a lot of opportunities for me in that that type of work, and you look like a genius now. So.
Sometimes you get lucky. No, I think it had more to do with your personality and your skill set and those things, and looking at what commissioning does. And that's probably a good topic, is what is commissioning, right? I think we talk about it a lot, like everybody understands what commissioning is. And we have different parts of commissioning now, and the commissioning group now is really broken up, and we've integrated it into the overall vertical business unit. But what maybe it's a good place to start. What is commissioning, and what are the pieces that we do now?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple ways I like to explain it. One is there's a great book definition which says that commissioning is a process that ensures that projects are designed, installed, functionally tested, and can be operated and maintained in accordance with the design intent or design requirements. Mm-hmm. That's the book definition. What I'd like to simplify it a lot of times and just say commissioning is just quality assurance in a building construction process. Okay. And so we're involved in a lot of different areas. We're involved in kind of where the business started, new building commissioning. We're involved in building enclosure work now. We're involved in existing building commissioning. And we're involved in kind of what was originally another offshoot of commissioning type work, and that's sustainability consulting, energy consulting. And so the business has really diverged from where we started back there in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and that's interesting because back in the early 2000s, I go back 35 years, total, and early on it was, that was part of what we did in the business was commissioning. I mean, I remember early days being on sites and doing some of that functional testing, and then that kind of in my mind, got squeezed out of our fees, and we quit doing it. And then come along 10 years later, commissioning kind of rises out of the ashes and says, hey, the owners saw the need for it. And then I think it was propelled along by the LEED certification and the requirement for commissioning. And the reason they did it was because there was a need to make sure the buildings ran well.
Absolutely. Yeah. LEED was a tremendous push in the commissioning business early in the 2000s. And I think that coupled with another thing, rising energy costs. And I think the third thing was, as you described, is that work had previously been done by the design team, and it gradually got squeezed out of their scope of work. And then at some point, building owners started to get kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired and not wondering what they were getting at that point.
Yeah, and I remember there were those clients, and then there were the other ones that were, I thought I was already paying for that. Was the common theme back then, right? We had to work our way through that and explain how the level of testing and quality assurance was just much higher with the commissioning group, and that was the start of it, really. And at the time it was a tough sell, and I would say we were early adopters at it. We were one of the first groups out of the gate. Would you agree with that?
We absolutely were, and I think I'd liken it, and I've talked about this before, but we were merging onto the road doing 25 miles an hour when the business was doing 25 miles an hour, and so we got a chance to come in and in a way influence some things in the industry, I think, to some degree. But we got a chance to get into the industry when the industry was starting up. And I see there's lots of competition now, but there are firms now are kind of trying to merge into the road going 25 miles an hour when the rest of the traffic is going 70. And so we had the advantage of getting in, building up our resume, building up our experience, and I think that's really propelled us to a lot more growth here in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think when I think about differentiators too, I've always felt like there's and I don't know how else to say it. There's the test and balance kind of commissioning guys, and then there's the guys that really look at the functional testing and understand the facilities. And I think that's where we separated ourselves in a way. And we had people that were technicians. We had engineers that designed the facilities. We had a little bit of all those things. We didn't just have a group of test and balance guys showing up to do a functional test on a pump or an air handler.
I think in a lot of respects, when we say we're a quality assurance agency and we're going to be evaluating what is often a very experienced designer's work or a constructor's work or a controls contractor's work, that the people we send out there in order to evaluate their work have to be generally at least as competent as they are. So I think you're exactly right. I think the investment we made in hiring very experienced people really put us in good stead in the industry. And I think a lot of repeat work is kind of how we've sustained our growth and everything. And I think the knowledge of our people plus their understanding of the importance of service have really put us in a good position.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of SSR On Air. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can also connect with us on social media. Links to everything can be found in the show's notes. Take care, everyone. See you next time.